My family cut me off for being divorced, so I threw Thanksgiving at my $1 million home for 29 guests, and what happened next made them cry in regret. I'm Hannah and I'm 34 years old. My family just uninvited me from Thanksgiving dinner because they said my divorce would embarrass them. So, I decided to throw my own celebration at my new $1 million home, complete with 29 guests who actually appreciate my company. When the photos hit social media, well, let's just say my phone hasn't stopped ringing since. Where are you watching from today? This story actually began 18 months ago, though I didn't realize it at the time. I was scrolling through my usual Wednesday evening routine of ignoring my mother's passive-aggressive texts when she called with her Thanksgiving ultimatum. "Hannah, we need to discuss Thanksgiving arrangements," she said in that tone she reserves for discussing unpleasant household maintenance. "Your father and I have been talking, and we think it would be best if you sat this year out." I nearly choked on my wine. Sat it out? Mom, it's Thanksgiving, not a tennis match. Don't be dramatic. It's just that with everything that's happened, your divorce and all, it would be awkward for the extended family. The Wheelers will be there. You know how they talk. And your cousin Janet just got engaged to that lovely lawyer. We don't want your situation casting a shadow over her happiness. My situation. As if my ex-husband Mark cheating on me with his dental hygienist was some kind of lifestyle choice I'd made to inconvenience family gatherings. Mom, I'm not contagious. Divorce isn't transmitted through turkey sharing. There's no need for sarcasm, Hannah. We're thinking of what's best for everyone. Maybe you could take the children somewhere nice. Make your own traditions. Disney World, perhaps? The children. My 8-year-old Sophie and 6-year-old Tyler, who had been looking forward to seeing their grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins, who had already made construction paper turkeys in art class specifically for Grandma Carol's refrigerator. And what exactly am I supposed to tell Sophie and Tyler? Tell them Mommy wanted to do something special. Just the three of you. They're young. They'll understand. No, what they'd understand is that Grandma and Grandpa didn't want them around because Mommy had failed at marriage. I could already picture Sophie's confused face when I explained why we wouldn't be going to the big family dinner she'd been talking about for weeks. This is unbelievable, Mom. I'm your daughter. Of course you are, honey. That's exactly why we're trying to protect you from an uncomfortable situation. People will ask questions, want details about the divorce. It's better this way. Better for whom, I wondered. Certainly not for me, sitting alone with my kids while the rest of the family gathered around the same dining room table where I'd spent every Thanksgiving for the past 34 years. But here's what my mother didn't know yet, what none of them knew. The divorce settlement negotiations were nearing completion, and Mark's attempts to hide assets hadn't gone quite as planned. My lawyer had been methodically building a case for over a year, and the forensic accountant's findings were becoming very interesting indeed. That modest 3-bedroom colonial we'd shared was about to become ancient history. Let me back up and tell you how this whole disaster started because the timeline matters, and trust me, it gets much worse before it gets better. 15 months ago, I was still Hannah Morrison, devoted wife and mother, living in our modest suburban Connecticut home with no idea my husband had been conducting more than dental procedures in his office. I discovered Mark's affair the way most wives do, through sheer accident, mixed with that nagging feeling that something wasn't right. He'd been working late more often, taking weekend conferences that never appeared on any dental association calendars I could find online. His phone had developed a mysterious need to be face down at all times, and his shower routine had suddenly expanded to include cologne application at 8 p.m. The smoking gun came when Sophie needed her retainer adjusted, and I decided to surprise Mark with lunch at his office. I'd done this dozens of times before, usually calling ahead, but that day, I wanted it to be spontaneous, something romantic to spice up our marriage that had settled into comfortable predictability. I walked into the office carrying Thai food from his favorite restaurant, expecting to find him reviewing patient charts. Instead, I found him reviewing his dental hygienist's anatomy with his tongue. Brittany, 23 years old, bleached blonde hair, and apparently very flexible based on the position I found them in on his examination chair. They were so engrossed in their procedure that neither noticed me standing in the doorway holding pad thai that suddenly smelled nauseating. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds, watching my husband demonstrate techniques they definitely don't teach in dental school. Then I did something that surprised even me. I didn't scream, didn't throw the food, didn't cause the dramatic scene you see in movies. I simply took out my phone and started recording. "Don't stop on my account," I said calmly when they finally noticed me. "I'm sure your patients would love to see this level of personal attention." Mark scrambled off Brittany so fast he nearly fell off the chair. "Hannah, this isn't what it looks like." "Really?" "Because it looks like you're performing an oral examination without gloves, which violates several health department regulations." I kept recording as Brittany grabbed her scrubs and Mark fumbled with his pants. "Should I report this to the dental board or would you prefer to explain it to them yourself?" That's when Mark's true colors showed. Instead of apologizing, instead of begging forgiveness, he got angry. "If you hadn't shown up unannounced, this wouldn't have happened." "Ah, yes. My fault for not scheduling spousal visits in advance. How inconsiderate of me. You know what I mean? You've been distant lately. Always tired, always busy with the kids. A man has needs, Hannah." And there it was. The classic cheater's playbook. Somehow, his inability to keep his dental instruments in his own mouth had become my failing as a wife. As I turned to leave, Brittany finally spoke up. "Mrs. Morrison, I'm so sorry. This just happened. We didn't plan it." I looked at this young woman who had just imploded my marriage and felt an unexpected wave of pity. "Honey, you're not the first and you won't be the last. But congratulations, you've just won the chance to find out exactly what kind of man Mark really is." Little did I know, I was about to discover exactly what kind of man Mark really was myself. And it was far worse than just a cheating husband. You'd think discovering your husband's affair would earn you some sympathy from your family, right? Wrong. Apparently, in the Morrison Family Handbook, catching your spouse cheating is less important than maintaining social appearances. I called my mother immediately after leaving Mark's office, needing someone to tell me I wasn't crazy for feeling betrayed. "Mom, I just caught Mark with his dental hygienist." In his office, on the examination chair. There was a pause. "Oh, Hannah, are you sure it wasn't just a misunderstanding? Unless dental school now teaches French kissing as standard procedure." "I'm pretty sure. Don't be crude. These things happen in marriages. The important thing is working through it. Working through it." As if infidelity was like a clogged drain that just needed some Drano and elbow grease. "Mom, he was cheating on me with his employee in his workplace." Marriage is hard work, honey. Sometimes people make mistakes when they're feeling unappreciated or neglected. Without even hearing Mark's side, my own mother had decided this was somehow my fault. So, I should just forgive him and pretend it never happened. I'm saying you should think about Sophie and Tyler before making any hasty decisions. Children need stable homes, not broken families. Stable homes where daddy cheats on mommy and mommy pretends everything is fine. Where children learn that love means accepting betrayal, and women should be grateful for whatever scraps of respect they receive. My father's reaction was equally disappointing. When I showed up at their house that evening with the kids, needing somewhere to stay while I figured out my next move, he pulled me aside. "Hannah, I've always respected Mark. He's a good provider, steady with the children. Every marriage goes through difficult periods. This isn't a difficult period. Dad, this is adultery. That's a very dramatic word. Look, I understand you're hurt, but divorce, that's permanent. That affects your reputation. Your children's future. My reputation. Not my happiness, not my self-respect, not the example I was setting for my children. My reputation in a community where apparently being a divorced woman was worse than being a cheated on wife. What about Mark's reputation? Shouldn't cheating on his wife affect that? Men make different kinds of mistakes than women do. Society understands that, but a divorced woman, especially with children, that's a harder situation to navigate. My brother David's response was the most infuriating. "Hannah, you need to be practical here. Mark makes excellent money, provides health insurance, has an established business. You want to throw that away because of one indiscretion, one that I know about, even if there were others. Is that really worth destroying your family over? Sophie and Tyler need their father. They need parents who respect each other. They need financial stability and a two-parent household. You've been out of the workforce for years. What are you going to do? Support 2 kids on whatever job you can find. That was the moment I realized my family saw me not as their daughter and sister, but as a liability, a woman whose value was entirely dependent on her ability to maintain a marriage, regardless of the cost to her dignity. Have you ever felt like the people who should support you most are actually rooting for you to fail? What they didn't realize was that I was already consulting with Patricia Wells, one of the best divorce attorneys in Connecticut. And Patricia had some very interesting questions about Mark's financial disclosures. 6 months into the divorce proceedings, I discovered something fascinating about Mark's business practices. Remember how my family kept emphasizing what a good provider he was? Turns out he was providing much more than any of us knew, just not for his family. My lawyer, Patricia Wells, was the kind of woman who wore power suits like armor and had built her reputation on dismantling cheating husbands' attempts to hide assets. Hannah, your husband's been very creative with his bookkeeping. We need to dig much deeper. Mark had been claiming his dental practice was struggling financially, that he could barely afford reasonable child support payments. But Patricia's forensic accountant, whom we'd hired after months of suspicious documentation, found some interesting discrepancies. Equipment purchases that seem inflated, business trips that don't align with any dental conferences, rent payments to a property management company that doesn't exist, Patricia explained during one of our lengthy meetings. He's been funneling money through his business to make it look less profitable than it actually is. The investigation took 8 months. 8 months of detailed financial analysis, subpoenas, and discovery requests. What we found was systematic financial deception going back at least 3 years. A separate business bank account that Brittany had access to, property investments hidden in his mother's name, even a small apartment downtown that he claimed was for business storage, but was conveniently furnished with a bed and expensive wine collection. When we finally presented our findings in mediation, Mark's cocky attitude evaporated faster than his claims of financial hardship. His lawyer looked like he'd aged a decade during our presentation. These accusations are completely unfounded, Mark sputtered. I've been completely transparent about my finances. Patricia slid a bank statement across the table. Then perhaps you can explain this series of $50,000 transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands. Mark's face went white. Those are legitimate business investments. In what business? Because according to the documentation we've obtained, those accounts appear designed specifically to hide marital assets from your wife. The mediation that Mark thought would result in him paying minimal support and keeping most of his assets turned into a very different conversation. By the end of that long day, I was looking at a settlement that included half of everything he'd tried to hide, plus additional compensation for his attempts at financial fraud. But the real surprise came when Patricia handed me a folder marked property assessments. Your settlement will include enough for a substantial down payment on a very nice house, Hannah. The kind of house that makes a statement about your independence. Over the following weeks, I spent my time house hunting in Connecticut's more desirable neighborhoods. Not because I needed a mansion, but because I wanted Mark and my family to understand exactly how wrong they'd been about my prospects as a divorced woman. The house I found was perfect. A contemporary colonial on 2 acres in Fairfield County. 4 bedrooms, 3.5 bathrooms, gourmet kitchen, and a pool that would make the country club envious. The kind of house my family had never imagined I could afford. When I made the offer 3 months later, I used my maiden name for the first time in years, Hannah Mitchell. It felt like putting on clothes that actually fit after wearing someone else's wardrobe too long. The sellers accepted my offer within days. With a substantial down payment and excellent credit, I was able to close within 6 weeks. As I signed the papers, I couldn't help but smile thinking about Mark's reaction when he discovered where his hidden assets had ended up. But I had no idea that Mark's financial deceptions were just the tip of the iceberg. Moving into my new house felt like stepping into a life I'd always been meant to live. The previous owners had impeccable taste and most of the furniture conveyed with the sale. So within 2 months of closing, I was living in magazine-worthy perfection. Sophie and Tyler adjusted to their new rooms with the resilience that children possess. Sophie claimed the bedroom with the built-in window seat overlooking the garden, while Tyler chose the one with the view of the pool. Their excitement about their new home was infectious, and for the first time in over a year, I felt genuinely happy. But the best part wasn't the house itself. It was watching Mark's face when he came for his first visitation pickup at my new address. He pulled into my circular driveway in his BMW, which suddenly looked modest against the backdrop of my new circumstances. "Quite the upgrade," he said, unable to hide the bitterness in his voice. "The divorce settlement has been very generous," I replied cheerfully. "Thanks for making it possible." He wanted to say more, but the kids were already running toward his car, excited to tell him about their new rooms and the pool they'd been using all summer. That's when I started planning my Thanksgiving celebration. If my family thought I'd be spending the holiday alone, feeling sorry for myself, they were about to be very disappointed. I called my friend Jessica first. We'd lost touch during my marriage years, but she'd reached out after hearing about my divorce, offering support without judgment. "Jessica, what are your Thanksgiving plans this year?" "Oh, the usual family chaos at my sister's house." "Why? Want to come to mine instead?" "I'm hosting a real celebration this year." "You're hosting, Hannah?" "That's wonderful." "Of course, I'll come." Next was my former college roommate, Sarah, who lived in California now, but had been planning to spend Thanksgiving alone since her kids were with their father that year. "Pack your bags," I told her. "You're flying to Connecticut." I called my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, the 78-year-old widow who lived alone in the estate next door. She'd been incredibly welcoming when I moved in, bringing homemade cookies and offering help with anything I needed. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm having a Thanksgiving dinner, and I'd love for you to join us." "Oh, my dear, that's so kind. But I wouldn't want to impose on your family celebration." "You wouldn't be imposing. You'd be honoring us with your presence." One by one, I invited people who deserved to be celebrated. My hairdresser, Maria, who'd been working through the holiday. The barista from my favorite coffee shop. Kevin, who'd been dreading his first Thanksgiving since coming out to his family. My children's teachers, who went above and beyond every day, but rarely got proper appreciation. Within 2 weeks, I had 29 confirmed guests for Thanksgiving dinner. People who understood loyalty, kindness, and the importance of chosen family over biological obligation. I hired a caterer, ordered fine wines, and arranged for professional photography. The menu was everything my mother's traditional Thanksgiving wasn't. Heritage turkey with truffle stuffing, maple bourbon glazed ham, lobster mac and cheese, roasted vegetables with exotic spices, and desserts that belonged in a French pâtisserie. The night before Thanksgiving, as I put finishing touches on my preparations, my phone rang. It was my sister Claire. "Hannah, Mom told me about your dinner party tomorrow." "It sounds lovely." "It's not a party, Claire. It's Thanksgiving dinner with people who actually want to celebrate with me." "Look, I know you're hurt about not being invited to Mom and Dad's, but maybe this could be a fresh start. Maybe after tomorrow, we could all get together and work things out." Work things out. As if their rejection of me and my children was just a scheduling conflict. "Claire, there's nothing to work out. You all made your choice." But as I hung up the phone, I realized she was right about one thing. Tomorrow would definitely be a fresh start. Thanksgiving morning dawned crisp and clear, the kind of perfect November day that makes Connecticut look like a postcard. I woke up early, not from anxiety, but from genuine excitement about the day ahead. Sophie and Tyler helped me set the table, arranging place cards and folding napkins with the seriousness of wedding planners. They'd been so excited about our special Thanksgiving that they'd made handmade decorations and written thank you notes for each guest. "Mommy, this is going to be the best Thanksgiving ever," Sophie announced as she adjusted the centerpiece for the 3rd time. "I think you're right, sweetheart." The caterers arrived at noon, transforming my kitchen into a professional operation. The photographer came early to capture the preparation process, and soon my house was filled with the sounds and smells of a celebration worth documenting. Guests began arriving at 3, and the energy was immediately different from any family gathering I'd ever attended. These were people who chose to be here, who were grateful for the invitation, who came with joy instead of obligation. Mrs. Patterson arrived first, dressed in her finest outfit and carrying a bottle of wine that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. "My dear, this house is absolutely magnificent," she said, kissing my cheek. "You've created something beautiful here." Sarah flew in from California, and we screamed like teenagers when she walked through the door. Jessica brought her elderly mother, who'd been widowed last year and facing her first holiday alone. Kevin, the barista, arrived with his boyfriend, both glowing with happiness at being somewhere they were celebrated, not tolerated. Maria brought her 3 children, who immediately bonded with Sophie and Tyler over the pool and elaborate playground in my backyard. As we gathered around my dining room table, extended to accommodate everyone, I felt a warmth I'd never experienced at any family gathering. These people were here because they wanted to be, because we'd built relationships based on mutual respect and genuine affection. When it came time for everyone to share what they were grateful for, the responses were heartfelt and real. Mrs. Patterson was grateful for neighbors who became family. Sarah was grateful for friendships that survived distance and time. Kevin was grateful for acceptance and love in all its forms. When my turn came, I looked around the table at these wonderful people sharing this incredible meal in my beautiful home. I'm grateful for the courage to build a life that reflects my values instead of other people's expectations. The photographer captured every moment. The laughter over dinner, the children playing together, the genuine connections being made between strangers becoming friends. By evening, we had documentation of what a real celebration looked like. As the last guests were leaving, thanking me profusely for one of the best Thanksgivings they'd ever had, I uploaded the photos to social media, not out of spite, but out of genuine pride in what we'd created. The response was immediate and overwhelming, but the responses I was most interested in came from the phone calls that started around 9 p.m. First was my brother David. "Hannah, I saw your photos. That looked like quite a celebration. It was wonderful with people who appreciate being included." Then Claire called. "Your dinner looked beautiful, very elegant. Thank you. Maybe next year we could all get together, combine our celebrations next year." As if there would be a next year invitation for them after this year's rejection, but the call I was waiting for came at nearly 11 p.m. My mother, her voice tight with something I couldn't quite identify. "Hannah, I saw your photographs online. That was quite an elaborate event." Yes, it was wonderful. We had 29 guests. Everyone had a beautiful time. 29 people. That's more than we had at our dinner. I wanted to make sure everyone who deserved to be celebrated was included. There was a long pause. "I hope you know this display has embarrassed the entire family. The Wheelers saw your photos. Janet's fiancé's parents saw them. Everyone's talking about how you excluded your own family." And there it was. They weren't upset that I'd been excluded. They were upset that I'd succeeded anyway. But as I hung up the phone and looked around my beautiful, quiet house, I realized something important. For the first time in my life, I didn't care what they thought. That feeling of liberation was about to become even more important than I imagined. The aftermath of my Thanksgiving celebration was even more entertaining than the dinner itself. Within 2 weeks, I was getting calls from people I hadn't heard from in years. All suddenly very interested in reconnecting with their dear friend Hannah. Distant relatives who'd somehow obtained my number sent lengthy texts about how family should stick together. Aunt Patricia, my father's sister, who'd openly criticized my career choices for years, left voicemails praising my entrepreneurial spirit and wondering if I might be interested in investing in her son's startup. The most amusing was my former sister-in-law, Mark's sister, Rachel, who'd been notably absent during my divorce proceedings. She showed up at my door uninvited on a Saturday morning, holding a store-bought coffee cake and wearing her most apologetic smile. "Hannah, I've been meaning to reach out. I feel terrible about how everything went down with Mark. Do you?" I asked. Not inviting her in because I remember you taking his side pretty decisively during the divorce. I was just trying to stay neutral. You know how it is with family loyalty. Family loyalty. The same family loyalty that had her telling people at her book club that I was probably cheating, too, and that Mark was the real victim here. "What can I do for you, Rachel?" Well, I was hoping we could put all that behind us. Maybe have dinner sometime. Let the kids spend time together again. Jake really misses Tyler and Sophie. Jake, her 10-year-old son, who'd been one of Tyler's best friends before the divorce, divided loyalties along predictable lines. Rachel had made it clear that her son wouldn't be playing at that woman's house anymore. That's interesting timing, I said. What changed your mind? She shifted uncomfortably. I just think life's too short to hold grudges. Life's too short or my bank account's too substantial. I suspected the latter, especially when she casually mentioned that she'd seen the photos from my Thanksgiving dinner and thought my house looked absolutely gorgeous. But the real entertainment came from my immediate family's escalating attempts to repair what they clearly now saw as a strategic error. My mother started sending care packages to the kids, elaborate gift baskets that arrived weekly with notes about how much Grandma missed them. David began inviting me to family events I'd never been included in before. We're having a small dinner party next weekend. Just close family and a few friends. You should come. Bring the kids. A dinner party? How unlike you to think of including me in social activities. Hannah, you're my sister. Of course, I want you there. My sister. The same sister he'd told to be practical about accepting her husband's infidelity because divorce was financially irresponsible. My father started showing up at my house unannounced, claiming he was just in the neighborhood. Considering my neighborhood was 40 minutes from his house and required tolls to access, his frequent presence was clearly calculated. Hannah, I've been thinking about what happened with Thanksgiving, he said during one of these surprise visits. Have you? I think we all misunderstood each other. Your mother was just worried about family gossip, but she never meant to exclude you permanently. Permanently, as if excluding me temporarily had been perfectly reasonable. Dad, what exactly do you want? I want my family back together. I want Sophie and Tyler to grow up knowing their grandparents. I want us to be a family again. We could have been a family when I needed support during my divorce. We could have been a family when I was rebuilding my life. We made mistakes, Hannah. Can't we move past this? Move past this. Skip over the part where they abandoned me in my darkest hour and proceed directly to the part where they benefit from my success. That evening, after my father left empty-handed once again, I realized something important. They weren't actually sorry for how they'd treated me. They were sorry about the consequences. There's a difference between regret and remorse. And my family was demonstrating the former while completely lacking the latter. January brought an unexpected complication to my carefully orchestrated new life. His name was James Richardson, and he was everything I hadn't realized I was looking for. We met at Sophie's school winter concert of all places. I was sitting in the auditorium taking photos of my daughter's performance when the gentleman beside me leaned over during intermission. Excuse me, but are you Sophie Mitchell's mother? I'm James, Emma Richardson's dad. Our daughters are in the same class. I looked at him properly for the first time. Tall, salt and pepper hair, genuinely warm smile, and the kind of confidence that comes from being comfortable in your own skin. Emma was the quiet girl Sophie had befriended recently. Yes, I'm Hannah. Sophie talks about Emma constantly. Emma feels the same way. She's been asking when she can see Sophie's new house with the pool. Sophie's been giving tour descriptions during art class. Apparently, Emma came home asking why we don't have a movie theater room. I laughed despite myself. Sophie's been known to embellish. We have a large TV in the basement, which in her mind qualifies as a cinema. After the concert, as we walked to the parking lot, James asked if I'd be interested in arranging the play date Emma had been requesting. Maybe this weekend I could drop her off. Or if you prefer, both girls could come to our place. Something about his demeanor put me at ease. There was no agenda in his invitation, no underlying assessment of my divorced status or financial situation, just a father trying to facilitate his daughter's friendship. Why don't you both come to our house Saturday afternoon? The girls can swim if it's warm enough, and you can see if Sophie's descriptions are accurate. Saturday arrived with unseasonably warm weather for January, which meant pool time was definitely possible. James arrived with Emma and a bottle of wine for the adults and homemade cookies from Emma's kitchen. You bake? I asked as Emma and Sophie disappeared toward the pool area. Emma bakes. I supervise and try not to burn anything. She's been on a cookie kick since Christmas. Speaking of holidays, how was your Christmas? Quiet. Emma's mother lives in California now, so it was just the two of us. We made pancakes for breakfast and watched movies. Very low-key. Divorced father, primary custody. No drama or bitterness in his voice when mentioning his ex-wife. My radar for red flags had been permanently activated after Mark, but James seemed refreshingly normal. As the afternoon progressed, I found myself genuinely enjoying adult conversation that didn't revolve around my divorce, my family drama, or my financial situation. James was a veterinarian with his own practice, passionate about animal welfare and completely unimpressed by material displays of wealth. "This is a beautiful house," he said as I gave him the tour Emma had been requesting. "But I have to say, the best part is watching how happy Sophie is here. She's got such confidence, such joy. That's not something you can buy." "Thank you. It's been an adjustment period for all of us. Divorce is tough on kids, but you're clearly doing something right." When he left that evening, he asked if I'd be interested in having dinner sometime, just adults somewhere. Emma can't critique my table manners. I said yes before I could overthink it. Our first date was supposed to be casual dinner at a local restaurant. Instead, we closed the place down, talking for hours about everything except the obvious topics. He didn't ask about my divorce settlement, my family situation, or my ex-husband. Instead, we discussed books, travel dreams, parenting philosophies, and the challenges of starting over in your 30s. "I have to admit," he said as we walked to our cars, "I was nervous about tonight." "Why?" "Single father, dating again after 3 years, meeting a woman who clearly has her life figured out. It's intimidating." "My life figured out, James. 18 months ago, I was married to a cheating dentist and estranged from my entire family. I'm making it up as I go along." "Well, you're doing a remarkable job of improvising." That's when I realized something terrifying and wonderful. I was falling for someone who liked me for who I was, not what I had or what I represented. By our third date, I was ready to introduce the complication of my family situation. "James, there's something you should know about me. My family and I are currently not speaking. May I ask why?" I told him the entire story. He listened without judgment, asking questions only for clarification. "So, your family rejected you when you needed support, then wanted back in when you found success." That's the simplified version. "Yes. And how do you feel about that?" Such a simple question, but no one had asked me that. Disappointed, angry, but also relieved. I'm finally seeing them clearly. That makes perfect sense. Sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones who force us to become who we're meant to be. But my family was about to meet him sooner than I'd planned. February brought the inevitable collision between my old life and my new one. My mother had been increasingly persistent about healing our family rift, which translated to increasingly desperate attempts to insert herself into my social circle. The breaking point came when she showed up at Sophie's 8th birthday party uninvited. I'd planned a small celebration at my house, just Sophie's closest friends and their parents, plus James and Emma. Nothing elaborate, just cake, pizza, and pool games since I'd had the pool heated for winter use. Sophie had specifically requested no big family drama for her birthday, which should have been my first clue that even an 8-year-old could see the toxic dynamics I'd been dealing with for decades. The party was in full swing when my mother's car pulled into my driveway. I watched through the kitchen window as she emerged, carrying an enormous wrapped present and wearing her most determined smile. "Hannah," she called out as she walked through my front door without knocking. Surprise! I couldn't miss my granddaughter's birthday. Every conversation in my living room stopped. Sophie looked confused. The other parents looked uncomfortable and James raised an eyebrow in my direction. "Mom, this is a private party. You weren't invited." "Oh, don't be silly. I'm Sophie's grandmother. Of course, I belong here." Sophie ran over to hug her because children are programmed to love their grandparents unconditionally. My mother immediately began playing to her audience. "Sophie, darling, you look absolutely beautiful. And this house, Hannah, it's even more stunning than in the photographs. Photographs. She'd been studying my social media posts like intelligence reports. Grandma, this is my friend Emma and this is Emma's daddy. Mr. James, Sophie announced. How lovely to meet you both, my mother said, extending her hand to James with obvious calculation. I'm Carol Mitchell, Hannah's mother. What followed was 45 minutes of my mother working the room like a politician at a fundraiser. She complimented every parent, asked about their children's activities, and managed to mention at least 3 times how proud she was of how well Hannah was adjusting to her new circumstances. New circumstances, as if my success was some kind of consolation prize rather than the result of my own strength and intelligence. But the real performance came when she cornered James in my kitchen while I was cutting cake. James, I understand you're a veterinarian. How wonderful. Hannah's always loved animals. She mentioned she'd had pets growing up. Oh yes, she's always been so nurturing, such a wonderful mother, too. Sophie and Tyler are just thriving under her care. I could hear the conversation from the dining room. It's been challenging for her, of course, with the divorce and all the changes, but she's handling it remarkably well. We're so proud of how she's rebuilt her life. We're so proud. The royal we of a family that had abandoned me months earlier. Hannah seems like a remarkable woman, James replied diplomatically. Oh, she is. And this house, can you believe it? From that little place she shared with Mark to this magnificent home, it's like a fairy tale. After the guests left and Sophie went upstairs to play with her new toys, I finally had the confrontation I'd been avoiding. Mom, what exactly did you think you were accomplishing today? I wanted to celebrate my granddaughter's birthday. Is that so terrible? You wanted to insert yourself into my life without permission and evaluate my new boyfriend. New boyfriend? Hannah? I had no idea you were seeing anyone. Of course, she had no idea. We didn't talk anymore. By her choice. His name is James. He's a good man, and his opinion of me isn't contingent on my financial situation. I never said it was. You spent the entire party making sure he knew how successful I'd become. As if that was the most important thing about me. I was just proud of you. You weren't proud when I left Mark. You weren't proud when I stood up for myself. You're only proud now that the outcome makes you look good. That's when she dropped the pretense entirely. Hannah, you're being unreasonable. We made mistakes. Yes, but we're family. Family forgives. And now that you're doing so well, now that you found someone new, isn't it time to put all this behind us? No, Mom. It's not. What do you want from us, Hannah? I looked at this woman who'd raised me, who'd taught me that family loyalty was paramount, who'd then demonstrated that her version of loyalty only flowed in one direction. I want you to understand that you don't get to choose when to be my family. As she left, I realized that introducing James to my family dynamics might have been the best thing that could have happened because now he'd seen exactly what I was dealing with, and he'd chosen to stay anyway. March brought news that changed everything I thought I knew about my divorce settlement. My lawyer, Patricia, called on a Tuesday morning with information that made me sit down hard in my kitchen chair. Hannah, we need to talk in person today if possible. Patricia's office felt different this time, more formal, more serious. She had files spread across her desk and the expression of someone about to deliver life-altering information. Hannah, I've been conducting some follow-up investigation into Mark's financial situation, and I've discovered something significant. More hidden assets? No, something much bigger. Mark's dental practice isn't just profitable. It's a front for money laundering operations. I stared at her, trying to process what she'd just said. A front for what exactly? We're talking about millions of dollars being moved through his business accounts from sources that have nothing to do with dentistry. The forensic accountant noticed irregularities that went beyond simple asset hiding. The room seemed to tilt around me. My ex-husband, the man I'd lived with for 5 years, the father of my children, was apparently running a criminal enterprise. How did you discover this? Payments from shell companies. Cash deposits that didn't align with patient records. Equipment purchases that exceeded what any dental practice could legitimately need. When we dug deeper with federal assistance, we found a systematic pattern. Patricia slid a folder across her desk. Inside were bank statements, wire transfer records, and business documents that painted a picture of organized financial crime. Mark's been washing money for at least 3 years, possibly longer. The dental practice was perfect cover because cash payments are normal in healthcare and expensive equipment purchases don't raise flags. And Brittany, she's heavily involved. Her access to the business accounts wasn't romantic. It was operational. She's been facilitating transfers and managing communications with people who definitely aren't patients. I felt nauseated, not because I still cared about Mark, but because I realized how close my children and I had come to being implicated in federal crimes. Patricia, what does this mean for me? For my settlement? Legally, you're protected. The divorce is final. You had no knowledge of illegal activities and all assets you received can be proven legitimate through our documentation. But Hannah, there's more. There was more. Of course, there was more. Federal investigators have been building a case against Mark for over a year. They approached me yesterday because they need your cooperation. My cooperation? You lived in the house where he conducted business calls. You had access to his computers, his files, his phone records. You might have seen or heard things that could help their case. I thought back to all those late nights Mark had claimed he was working. All those mysterious phone calls, all those business trips that never quite added up. What happens if I cooperate? You help put a criminal behind bars and ensure he never has the opportunity to endanger your children again. And if I don't? The investigation continues without your help, but it might take longer to build a solid case. And Hannah, there's something else you need to know. I wasn't sure how much more devastating information I could absorb. Mark's been trying to modify custody arrangements. His lawyer filed a motion claiming that your extravagant lifestyle indicates you're not providing stable environment for the children. The irony was breathtaking. The man who'd been laundering money for criminals was claiming I was the unfit parent because I'd used my legitimate settlement to buy a nice house. He doesn't know that we know about his criminal activities yet, but if he's trying to change custody, it's possible he's planning to disappear with the children. The thought of Mark taking my children and fleeing to avoid federal prosecution made my blood run cold. That evening, after the kids were in bed, I called James. He'd become my sounding board for major decisions. James, I need to tell you something about Mark that I just learned myself. I explained everything Patricia had told me, watching his expression grow more serious with each detail. Hannah, you need to cooperate with federal investigators immediately. I know. I'm scared though. Not for me, but for what this means for Sophie and Tyler. It means their father is a criminal who's been putting their safety at risk for years. You're protecting them from someone who was never worthy of being their father. The next morning, I called the federal contact Patricia had given me. The federal raid on Mark's dental office happened on a Thursday morning in late March. While Sophie and Tyler were safely at school, I watched the news coverage from my living room. Seeing my ex-husband led away in handcuffs on every local channel, my phone started ringing immediately. First, Patricia confirming that everything had proceeded according to plan. Then, my mother, who'd apparently seen the news and was calling with what she probably thought was concern. Hannah, this is just terrible. Poor Sophie and Tyler seeing their father on television like this. Poor Sophie and Tyler were safely at school, unaware that their father's criminal enterprise had just collapsed. I'd made sure of that by arranging for them to spend the afternoon at James' house until the initial media frenzy died down. Mom, the children are fine. They're protected. But the scandal, what will people think? What will people think? Even in the face of federal crimes and money laundering, my mother's primary concern was still about appearances. People will think their father was a criminal who got what he deserved. You don't have to sound so pleased about it. I wasn't pleased that my children's father was a criminal, but I was absolutely pleased that he was being held accountable. The real shock came later that afternoon when Agent Sarah Chen called with an update. Mrs. Mitchell, we need to discuss something that's come to light during our investigation of your ex-husband's communications. What kind of something? It appears certain family members have been in contact with Mark recently, providing him with information about your activities, your relationship with James Richardson, and your financial situation. The world tilted around me again. What kind of information? Phone records show regular calls between your mother and Mark's personal cell phone over the past 4 months. During questioning, Mark admitted that your mother had been updating him on your social media posts, your new relationship, and details about your house and lifestyle. I sat down heavily on my couch trying to process this betrayal on top of everything else. Agent Chen, why would my mother be talking to my ex-husband? According to Mark, your mother contacted him initially expressing concern that you were becoming too comfortable with your new situation. She apparently believed that if Mark could regain custody of the children, you'd be forced to reconcile with your family for support. My own mother had been working with my criminal ex-husband to undermine my custody and independence. The woman who'd raised me had been collaborating with the man who'd betrayed our family in the most fundamental ways possible. Agent Chen, is my mother in legal trouble? She wasn't aware of Mark's criminal activities, so she's not implicated in the money laundering, but she did provide information that Mark was using to build his custody modification case against you. After hanging up with Agent Chen, I sat in my beautiful living room, surrounded by the life I'd built from the ashes of my marriage, and finally understood the full scope of my family's betrayal. They hadn't just abandoned me when I needed support. They'd actively worked against my recovery and independence. My phone buzzed with a text from James. Kids are happy here. Emma's making them grilled cheese. Take all the time you need to process today's news. That's when I realized something crucial. The family I'd been mourning, the relationships I'd been hoping to repair, the people I'd been trying to win back, they had never actually existed. I'd been grieving a fantasy, trying to rebuild connections with people who had never truly supported me at all. But I'd also discovered something else. I'd built a real family with Sophie, Tyler, and now James and Emma. A family based on genuine love, mutual respect, and authentic support. The people who'd raised me had taught me exactly what family shouldn't be. And in rejecting their example, I'd learned what family could actually become. That evening, when the kids were safely home and the news trucks had left my neighborhood, I made a decision that would finalize my independence once and for all. I was going to tell my family exactly what I thought of their collaboration with Mark, and then I was going to close the door on that chapter of my life permanently. But first, I was going to make sure they understood precisely how wrong they'd been about me, about my strength, and about my ability to thrive without their approval. The little girl who'd spent decades seeking their validation was gone forever. In her place stood a woman who'd built something beautiful from the wreckage they'd helped create. The final confrontation happened at my house, on my terms, with my chosen family present as witnesses to the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. I invited my parents, David and Claire, over for Sunday brunch in early April, telling them I wanted to clear the air after Mark's arrest. They arrived expecting reconciliation, apologies, and a return to the family dynamics they preferred. Instead, they found James, Emma, Sophie, and Tyler in my kitchen along with Agent Chen, who'd agreed to be present in case there were any questions about the federal investigation. Hannah, what's all this? My mother asked, clearly uncomfortable with the formal atmosphere. This is the conversation we should have had 18 months ago. Please sit down. I'd prepared for this moment, organized my thoughts, and decided exactly what needed to be said. No more family politeness. No more avoiding conflict. No more protecting their feelings at the expense of my own truth. I want you all to understand what happened during Mark's arrest and what role you played in the events leading up to it. Agent Chen stepped forward. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell. I'm Agent Sarah Chen with the FBI. During our investigation into Mark Morrison's criminal activities, we discovered that Mrs. Carol Mitchell had been providing him with information about Hannah's personal life and financial situation. My father's face went white. Carol, what is she talking about? My mother's careful composure cracked. I was just trying to help. Hannah was being so stubborn about the family, and Mark seemed genuinely concerned about the children's welfare. Mom. Mark was laundering money for organized crime. He was using information about my life to build a custody case designed to help him flee the country with my children. I didn't know that. You didn't know because you didn't care to know. You were so determined to prove I couldn't survive without this family that you collaborated with a man who'd already proven he couldn't be trusted. David tried to interrupt. Hannah, that's not fair. Mom was just worried about you. Worried about me? She uninvited me from Thanksgiving because my divorce might embarrass the family. She told Mark about my relationship with James, my financial situation, and my children's activities. She was working against me, not for me. I turned to Claire. And you were equally complicit. Every family gathering I wasn't invited to. Every conversation about how I needed to be more reasonable about Mark's affair, every suggestion that I should prioritize keeping the family together over my own dignity. Hannah, we love you, Claire said weakly. No, you love the idea of me. You love a version of me that accepts whatever treatment you dish out, that prioritizes your comfort over my well-being, that stays in bad situations so you don't have to deal with the inconvenience of supporting me. James stepped closer to me. His presence a reminder that I now had people who actually supported me unconditionally. But here's what you never understood about me, I continued. I didn't need your approval to rebuild my life. I didn't need your permission to be successful. I didn't need your validation to find love again. I gestured around my beautiful kitchen where Sophie and Tyler were helping Emma set the table. Where Agent Chin stood as evidence of how thoroughly Mark's criminal life had collapsed, where James smiled at me with genuine pride and admiration. I built this life without your help, despite your opposition. And in spite of your attempts to undermine it. My mother was crying now. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of a woman realizing she'd lost control of a situation she'd never actually controlled. What do you want from us, Hannah? My father asked. I want you to understand that I don't need anything from you anymore. I wanted you to be my family, but you chose to be my opponents instead. So that's it. You're cutting us off forever. I'm accepting the reality of who you are and who you've always been. I spent 34 years trying to earn love that should have been freely given. I won't spend the rest of my life making the same mistake. Agent Chin excused herself. Her job done. The evidence of my family's betrayal had been presented clearly and without emotional manipulation. As my parents and siblings prepared to leave, my mother made one final attempt to regain control. Hannah, you'll regret this. Family is forever. Someday you'll need us, and we won't be there. I looked at this woman who'd taught me about conditional love, who'd shown me that family could be a weapon used against you, who'd demonstrated that loyalty was a one-way street in her world. Mom, I already needed you and you weren't there. The difference is now I don't need you anymore. After they left, James found me on my back patio, watching Sophie, Tyler, and Emma play in the pool despite the April chill. They were laughing, splashing, creating memories that would define their understanding of what family could be. How do you feel? He asked. Free, I said, and realized it was completely true. Months ago, I'd been a woman defined by other people's expectations, limited by other people's approval, diminished by other people's conditions. Now I was Hannah Mitchell, successful, independent, surrounded by people who loved me exactly as I was. The family that had rejected me had inadvertently given me the greatest gift possible. They'd forced me to become the woman I was always meant to be. And that woman was magnificent.